The translucent alloy walls of Auric Outpost hummed with a familiar tension. Standing at the edge of the volatile Garin Nebula, the Neutral Zone Medical Station served as an unlikely sanctuary for creatures from across the galactic spectrum. Dr. Selene Maris paused at the panoramic viewport in the station's central hub, watching as iridescent plasma waves crashed against the outpost's quantum shielding. The nebula's unpredictable currents illuminated the darkness of space, casting an eerie glow across her face. "Beautiful and deadly," she murmured, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the reinforced glass. "Like most of our patients." Behind her, the medical station continued its perpetual dance of organized chaos. Crystalline silicon lifeforms floated in specialized suspension chambers, their faceted bodies refracting light in hypnotic patterns. In the adjacent ward, plasma-based intelligences pulsed within containment fields, their consciousness flickering between visible and quantum states. The station housed 17 distinct biomes, each carefully calibrated to sustain lifeforms that would perish in standard environments. Selene turned as her neural implant chimed with an incoming transmission. The holographic display that materialized before her eyes showed the unmistakable insignia of the Exothar High Command. "Another apex predator casualty," she said, allowing herself a small sigh. The Exothar, warriors, conquerors, hunters, were revered across the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency and technological prowess. Their culture of silence and honor made them particularly difficult patients. To an Exothar, asking for help was tantamount to personal annihilation. Nurse Terrell Kin approached, his youthful Terran features betraying the anxiety he was attempting to suppress. "The preliminary scans are concerning, Dr. Maris." He handed her a crystalline data slate. Multiple fractures to the exoskeletal carapace, collapsed subdimensional circulatory channels, and multispectrum radiation burns. The patient was found adrift in a scout vessel on the edge of the prohibited zone. Selene's eyebrows arched as she studied the readings. The nebula's inner sanctum? What was an Exothar doing there? The question was rhetorical. The warrior species often engaged in forbidden skirmishes, testing their mettle against the most lethal environments in the galaxy. "Her war title is registered as Vara the Silent," Terrell continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if the name itself carried power. "She's apparently something of a legend among their hunting cadres." Selene nodded slowly, her mind already calculating survival probabilities and treatment protocols. The Exothar female would be brought in unconscious, the only state in which the proud warriors would tolerate assistance, but the station administrators would insist on adherence to Exothar protocols. Allow natural death without invasive measures. "Prepare Trauma Bay 9, she ordered, her voice taking on the clinical precision that had made her reputation as the station's chief xenobiotic surgeon. "And alert the quantum regeneration team." Terrell's eyes widened. "But the Allied Healing Compact explicitly prohibits—" "I'm aware of the treaty restrictions." Nurse Kin. Selene's tone brooked no argument. "But I took an oath to preserve life. All life. Even apex predators deserve a fighting chance." The young nurse hesitated, then nodded, hurrying away to make preparations. As he disappeared down the corridor, Selene returned her gaze to the nebula. Its swirling vortices of energy seemed to mirror the conflict brewing within her. Duty versus protocol. Compassion versus politics. "Let's see if you're as fierce as they say. Vara the Silent," she whispered to the empty observation deck. "Because you're going to need every ounce of that legendary strength to survive what's coming." At precisely 0413, Auric Standard Time, the medical transport docked with a pneumatic hiss. Flight medic Rugen Oss, his Raxil heritage evident in the ridge of cartilage that ran along his scalp, led the gurney through the airlock. The unconscious form of Vara the Silent lay motionless on the omnivector bed. her massive frame dwarfing the human medical staff. Even in her current state, the Exothar commander emanated an aura of lethal capability. Catastrophic injuries, Rugen reported, not bothering to hide the note of satisfaction in his voice. The herbivorous Raxil species had historically been prey to Exothar hunting parties. She was engaging in some sort of forbidden ritual combat within the nebula's radiation zone. Vessel's black box suggests she was fighting something big. Celine approached the gurney, professional curiosity overriding her initial apprehension. Vara's exoskeletal armor, normally an impenetrable obsidian carapace, was fractured in multiple places, revealing the pulsing yellow-green circulatory fluid beneath. Where the nebula's energy had pierced her defenses, the flesh was scorched with peculiar geometric patterns, as if reality itself had branded her. "Get her into Trauma Bay 9, Celine ordered, falling into step beside the gurney. "Start subdimensional field stabilization and prepare the nanite synthesis chamber." Chief Administrator Rin Tavar intercepted them at the entrance to the medical wing, his tall, gaunt frame blocking their path. "A moment, Dr. Maris." His voice was cold, bureaucratic. "I've received communication from the Exothar envoys stationed aboard. They demand we respect traditional protocols." Celine met his gaze unflinchingly. "With all due respect, Administrator, this patient has minutes, not hours. The traditional protocols amount to watching her die." "That is their way," Tavar replied, lowering his voice. "You know the political ramifications of interfering with Exothar cultural practices. The station's neutrality could be compromised." "She's unconscious and can't refuse treatment," Celine countered, "until she wakes and explicitly denies assistance. Medical ethics dictate I do everything in my power to save her life." The administrator's expression hardened. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Doctor. The Exothar do not forgive, and they do not forget." "Neither do I," Celine replied, gesturing for the medical team to continue toward Trauma Bay 9. "If you want to stop me, you'll need to relieve me of duty. Officially." Tavar's lips pressed into a thin line, but he stepped aside. "This will come back to haunt you, Maris. Mark my words." As they wheeled Vara into the specialized treatment area, Celine felt a grim determination settle over her. The bay's sophisticated monitoring systems immediately began cataloging the Exothar's deteriorating condition. Holographic displays flickered to life around the central examination platform, showing cascading cellular breakdown across multiple biological systems. "Oxygen saturation at 27% and falling," called out Nurse Terrell, his fingers dancing across the control interface. "Dimensional coherence at 43%. Flight medic Rugen hesitated at the threshold, his natural instinct to flee from an apex predator warring with his medical training. "The Exothar compact is clear," he said, voice tight. "They consider it the highest dishonor to receive life-saving intervention. If she survives, her own people might execute her for the shame." "That's her decision to make when she wakes up," Celine replied, not looking up from the diagnostic console. "If she wants to die after we save her, that's her prerogative." She activated her neural implant, linking directly to the station's medical database. "Initiate quantum regeneration matrix." A warning klaxon immediately sounded as the station's AI detected the activation of restricted technology. The QRM, a cutting-edge device capable of manipulating matter at the quantum level to accelerate healing, was explicitly prohibited for use on apex predator species, due to fears they might reverse engineer the technology for warfare. "Override code Maris Theta 93, Celine commanded, silencing the alarm. "Authorization confirmed under Emergency Medical Protocol 7. The center of the trauma bay hummed as the QRM powered up, bathing Vara's broken body in a soft, blue glow. Simultaneously, Celine activated the extraction synthesis nanites, microscopic robots programmed to repair damage at the cellular level. Both technologies represented the pinnacle of allied medical science, and both were absolutely forbidden for use on Exothar patients. Doctor, Terrell's voice trembled slightly. Exothar advisors are demanding access to the bay. Security is trying to hold them back. But, seal the doors, Celine ordered, pulling on phosphorescent medical gloves that would allow her to manipulate the holographic interfaces with greater precision. Full quarantine protocols. Cite potential dimensional contamination. As the trauma bay's reinforced doors slid shut with a definitive thud, Celine became aware of a subtle change in the atmosphere. Vara's multifaceted ocular clusters, previously dormant, had begun to flicker with consciousness. The predator was waking up. "Increase sedation," Celine commanded. But it was already too late. With a movement so swift it seemed to defy physics, Vara's massive clawed appendage lashed out, knocking the sedation apparatus across the room, where it embedded in the bulkhead with a shower of sparks. The Exothar commander hissed in her native tongue, the translator implants in the medical staff's ears, rendering her words into standard. Die. With honor. No. Intervention. Celine held her ground as Vara struggled to rise from the examination platform, yellow-green fluid seeping from her wounds. "You're in Aurek Outpost Medical Station," she explained calmly. "Your vessel was found adrift after sustaining damage in the Garen Nebula." Vara's ocular clusters fixed on Celine with predatory intensity. "I know where I am. Human. I choose. The warrior's path. Death before. Dishonor." "You'll have plenty of opportunities to die honorably in the future," Celine replied, carefully maneuvering closer to the biomedical controls. "But right now, you're in my trauma bay, and in here, I make the decisions." The Exothar attempted to rise again, but her injuries proved too severe. She collapsed back onto the platform, mandibles clicking in what the translator rendered as a string of obscenities. "Your interference violates the compact." Sue me," Celine muttered, taking advantage of Vara's momentary weakness to activate the restraint field. A mesh of quantum particles enveloped the Exothar, immobilizing her without physical contact. "Nurse Kin, prepare the nanite infusion. Flight Medic Os, stabilize those subdimensional channels before they collapse completely." Rugen hesitated, his herbivore instincts making him reluctant to approach the restrained predator. "Doctor, her vitals are plummeting. Oxygen saturation down to 15%. Dimensional coherence at 22%. "Then, move faster," Celine snapped, inputting commands into the QRM's control panel. The machine hummed louder, its energy field intensifying around Vara's shattered carapace. Outside the sealed trauma bay, the commotion grew louder. Through the reinforced viewport, Celine could see Exothar envoy Varthol gesticulating angrily at Administrator Tavar. Security personnel formed a barrier between the diplomatic delegation and the medical facility. But it was clear the situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Dr. Maris," Terrell's voice had risen an octave in panic. "The station's security override has been activated. They'll have the doors open in less than 5 minutes." Celine looked from the external chaos to her patient. Vara had gone still, her struggles ceasing as her body's resources focused on simply remaining alive. The vital signs displayed on the holographic monitors were trending inexorably toward zero on multiple spectra. "We're losing her," Rugen announced unnecessarily. "Oxygen saturation at 5%. Dimensional coherence at 12%. For a moment, doubt crept into Celine's mind. Perhaps she had overstepped. Perhaps the Exothar way, allowing warriors to die with dignity, was not hers to challenge. She placed her gloved hand near Vara's head, not quite touching the alien warrior. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought I could save you." What happened next would later be recorded in the station's official logs as Incident Vara 1, a designation that failed entirely to capture its significance. As Celine began to withdraw her hand, Vara's ocular clusters flickered once more. The Exothar commander, with what must have been her last reservoir of strength, turned her massive head toward the human doctor. Her mandibles parted, and a single word escaped, so quietly that only Celine could hear it. "Please!" The word hung in the air between them, a whispered plea that shattered centuries of Exothar protocol. In that single syllable, Vara admitted that survival was preferable to death, even at the cost of honor. Celine's eyes widened as she processed what she had heard. "Initiate emergency override of the QRM," she commanded, her voice ringing with renewed purpose. "Maximum output, nanite infusion at therapeutic saturation, multi-phase neural reconstruction, now." The trauma bay erupted into frantic activity. The QRM's gentle blue glow intensified to a blinding white as the machine channeled unprecedented levels of quantum energy. The extraction synthesis nanites, released in a glittering cloud, swarmed over Vara's injuries, repairing shattered subdermal channels and stabilizing the collapsing dimensional pathways that constituted the Exothar equivalent of a nervous system. "Security override in 3 minutes," Terrell called out, his hands moving with surprising steadiness across the control interfaces. "They can wait," Celine replied, focused entirely on the cascade of biological reactions taking place before her. She activated specialized pain nullifiers, calibrated specifically for Exothar neurophysiology, to suppress the excruciating agony that the predator must be experiencing. Rugen, setting aside his instinctive fear, worked alongside her with professional precision. "Subdimensional coherence stabilizing at 19%, he reported. "Still critical, but no longer in freefall." For 12 relentless hours, the medical team fought to reverse Vara's terminal decline. The security override was temporarily withdrawn when Administrator Tavar, in a rare display of backbone, cited station emergency protocols that superseded diplomatic considerations. Outside Trauma Bay 9, Exothar envoys paced like caged predators themselves, while the station buzzed with rumors that an Exothar commander was being saved against her will. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, Vara's biometrics began to improve. Oxygen saturation climbed to 30%, then 45%. Dimensional coherence stabilized at 51%. The fractures in her exoskeletal carapace, under the influence of the QRM, began to knit together with crystalline precision. "She's going to make it," Celine said softly, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction as she observed the holographic displays. "Against all odds." Rugen shook his head in disbelief. "I never thought I'd see the day when I'd help save an Exothar's life. My ancestors would disown me." "Your ancestors never took the Hippocratic Oath," Celine replied. She turned to Terrell, who was slumped in exhaustion at the monitoring station. "Maintain sedation for now. When her condition stabilizes further, we'll begin the process of bringing her back to consciousness." News of Vara's treatment spread rapidly throughout Auric Outpost. Exothar envoys stormed the administrative offices, demanding accountability for what they termed a cultural violation of the highest order. The Galactic Council dispatched inspectors to evaluate the alleged breach of interstellar treaties. Security around Trauma Bay 9 was tripled, with armed personnel standing guard to prevent any retaliatory action. 3 days later, as Celine was reviewing Vara's latest bioscans, the Exothar commander began to stir. The sedation protocol had been gradually reduced to allow for neurological assessment, and now the moment of reckoning had arrived. Celine dismissed the other medical staff, feeling that this confrontation should be as private as possible. Vara's ocular clusters flickered rapidly as consciousness returned. For several moments, she lay perfectly still, assessing her surroundings with predatory caution. Then, with a fluidity that belied her recent injuries, she sat upright on the examination platform. "Human," she hissed, the translator rendering her native speech into standard. "You have committed an abomination." Celine stood her ground, meeting the Exothar's gaze without flinching. "I saved your life, as requested." Vara's mandibles clicked in agitation. "I made no such request. You hallucinate, flesh creature." "You said please," Celine replied quietly. One word, that was enough. The Exothar's massive frame went rigid. For a tense moment, Celine wondered if Vara might attack her. Even in a weakened state, the predator could easily tear a human apart. Instead, Vara turned her head away, a gesture that the doctor recognized as the closest thing to shame that an Exothar could express. "If I said such a thing," Vara finally responded, "it was the delirium of approaching death. It holds no meaning." "It held enough meaning for me to risk interstellar incident," Celine countered. She approached a monitoring console and called up a holographic display of Vara's current biological status. "Your exoskeletal integrity is at 78% and improving. Subdimensional coherence has stabilized at 63%. You'll need several more treatments with the QRM, but you should make a full recovery." Vara studied the display, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her cultural indignation. "This technology, it is not known to my people. And it will remain that way," Celine said firmly. "The QRM is restricted technology. Its use on your species violates at least 3 interstellar treaties. I could lose my medical license. This station could face sanctions." "Then why?" Vara's question was simple but profound. Celine considered her answer carefully. "Because a life is a life. Because your existence has value beyond your capacity as a warrior. Because when you whispered please, you told me that somewhere inside, beneath all that Exothar doctrine, you wanted to live." For several days, as Vara's recovery progressed, a strange dynamic developed between the human doctor and the Exothar commander. Initial hostility gave way to grudging respect, then to a tentative exchange of ideas. Celine found herself fascinated by Vara's perspectives on dimensional physics. The Exothar understanding of subspace was far more advanced than human science, while Vara seemed intrigued by human concepts of medical ethics. "Your species expends extraordinary resources to preserve individual lives," Vara observed during one of their conversations. "It is inefficient." "Efficiency isn't everything," Celine replied, adjusting the settings on the QRM for Vara's daily treatment. "Compassion has its own value." "Compassion." Vara repeated the word as if tasting an exotic food. "This concept exists in Exothar language only as a warning. Beware the weakness of compassion. Our warriors are taught." Celine smiled slightly. "And yet, here you are, alive because of it." On the 7th day of Vara's recovery, the political situation reached a critical juncture. The Galactic Council's inspectors had completed their evaluation and were prepared to announce sanctions against Auric Outpost for the treaty violations. Administrator Tavar, his career hanging in the balance, requested an urgent meeting with Celine. "They're going to shut us down," he informed her, his normally composed facade cracking under the strain. "The Exothar delegation is demanding reparations. The Council is talking about revoking our neutral zone status." Celine had anticipated this outcome, but hearing it confirmed still sent a chill through her. "What about the patients currently under treatment? There are 17 critical cases that can't be moved." "Collateral damage," Tavar replied bitterly. "Politics trumps medicine. Always has." When Celine returned to Trauma Bay 9, she found Vara standing at the viewport, her massive frame silhouetted against the nebula's swirling energies. The Exothar commander had regained much of her strength, though the QRM treatments would need to continue for several more weeks to ensure complete recovery. "Your administrative drone brings ill tidings," Vara observed without turning. Her enhanced senses had obviously detected the conversation despite the supposed soundproofing of Tavar's office. "The station is facing sanctions," Celine confirmed, seeing no point in dissembling. Your people are quite eager to see us punished for saving your life. Vara turned, her ocular clusters focusing intently on the human doctor. You knew this would happen, yet you proceeded. I did. Why? Celine shrugged, a very human gesture that she knew Vara found puzzling. Because it was the right thing to do. Because when faced with a choice between political expediency and preserving life, I'll choose life every time. Something shifted in Vara's demeanor, a subtle change that Celine might have missed if she hadn't spent the past week studying the predator's body language. You humans are perplexing creatures, physically fragile, yet you act with such certainty. We have to, Celine replied. Otherwise, the universe would overwhelm us. Later that day, as the Galactic Council's representatives prepared to announce their decision, an unexpected development occurred. Vara, moving with the deadly grace that had made her legendary among her kind, entered the station's council chamber unannounced. The assembled diplomats, human, exothar, and representatives from a dozen other species, fell silent as the apex predator approached the central podium. I am Vara, called the Silent among my people, she announced, her translator rendering her words in standard for all to understand. I stand before you to invoke the Dead Oath. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Dead Oath was an ancient exothar tradition, rarely invoked and even more rarely witnessed by outsiders. According to legend, it dated back to the earliest days of their civilization, before they had become the feared warriors of the galaxy. By the ancient laws of my people, Vara continued, when one's life is preserved through the actions of another, a bond is formed, not of subordination, but of equal guardianship. I acknowledge this debt to Dr. Celine Maris of Auric Outpost. The Exothar delegation erupted in protest, Envoy Varthel's voice rising above the others. This is unprecedented. The oath cannot apply to off-worlders, especially when the intervention violated our most sacred traditions. Vara turned her imposing frame toward her countrymen, and even the hardened diplomats seemed to shrink back. I have spoken the words. The oath is invoked by our most ancient laws. It cannot be undone. The council chamber descended into chaos as the implications rippled outward. A debt oath between an Exothar commander and a human doctor was unheard of. It created a connection that transcended political boundaries and treaty obligations. By their own traditions, the Exothar could not punish Celine without also dishonoring Vara, and despite her transgression, Vara's status as a legendary warrior made her untouchable. In the days that followed, an uneasy resolution was negotiated. The Galactic Council, citing the unprecedented precedent established by the Dead Oath, annulled the punishments against Auric Outpost. The Exothar delegation, unable to challenge Vara directly, withdrew their demands for reparations. Administrator Tavar, whose career had balanced on a knife's edge, found himself hailed as a visionary leader who had stood firm against political pressure in the name of medical ethics. For Celine and Vara, however, the most significant changes were personal rather than political. As the Exothar commander's recovery continued, their discussions deepened, touching on subjects that neither would have thought possible before. In the nebula, Vara confided during one of their final QRM sessions, I encountered something beyond understanding. Not an enemy to be conquered, but a presence that simply was. It showed me how small we all are, Exothar, human, all species, against the vastness of existence. Celine nodded, making final adjustments to the quantum field. The universe has a way of putting things in perspective. When I was dying, Vara continued, her voice unusually reflective, I realized that all our codes, all our traditions, they are constructs, meaningful, yes, but not absolute. In that moment, facing oblivion. What mattered was not how I died, but that I had lived. "And now?" Celine asked. "What matters now?" Vara's ocular clusters focused on the human doctor with an intensity that Celine had come to recognize as the exothar equivalent of a smile. "Now, what matters is what we do with the lives we have. You taught me that, Dr. Maris." "Celine," she corrected gently. "After saving your life and nearly causing an interstellar incident, I think we're on a first-name basis." 3 months after the incident, that would later be known across the galaxy as the Auric Precedent, Celine stood once again at the panoramic viewport in the station's central hub. The Gaharan Nebula continued its eternal dance of creation and destruction, indifferent to the tiny lives that observed it. "Still beautiful," came a familiar voice behind her. "Still deadly." Celine turned to find Vara approaching, her massive frame moving with the fluid grace that had returned with her complete recovery. The Exothar commander would be departing the station tomorrow, returning to her duties among her people. But things would never be quite the same for either of them. "The nebula doesn't change," Celine agreed. "But we do." Vara stood beside her, an apex predator and a human doctor, gazing out at the cosmos together. "My people have begun to question our doctrine on weakness and alliance," she said. "It will be a slow change, spanning generations perhaps, but it has begun." "Because of one word," Celine mused. "One whispered, 'Please.'" "Because you heard it," Vara corrected. "Many would have ignored it, dismissed it as delirium or desperation. You chose to listen." As they stood in contemplative silence, watching the nebula's energies illuminate the darkness, Celine reflected on the power of that moment, a predator's vulnerability and a doctor's determination colliding to create something new, something that transcended their differences and spoke to a deeper truth about all sentient life, that in our moments of greatest weakness, we find our greatest strength. "What will you do now?" Celine asked finally. Vara's mandibles clicked in what the translator now rendered as thoughtful consideration. "I will return to my people, bearing both the mark of shame for accepting help and the honor of the dead oath. I will be a contradiction, a paradox they must reconcile. And in that reconciliation, perhaps change will find root." "And you?" Vara inquired. "Your actions have made you somewhat notorious across the quadrant. The doctor who defied an empire to save a predator." Celine smiled. "I'll keep doing what I've always done, saving lives, one patient at a time, one crisis at a time." The next morning, as Vara's vessel prepared to depart, the Exothar commander made one final visit to Trauma Bay 9. Celine found her standing beside the now dormant quantum regeneration matrix, her clawed appendage hovering just above its surface. "Your technology is remarkable," Vara observed, "but it is merely a tool. The true healing came from something else entirely." "Compassion," Celine suggested. "Connection," Vara corrected. "The recognition that beneath our differences, predator and prey, warrior and healer, we share something essential." As they parted, Vara pressed a small crystalline object into Celane's hand. "A communication frequency," the Exothar explained. "Encoded to my personal quantum signature. If you ever require the services of an apex predator, you need only transmit." Celine accepted the gift with the gravity it deserved. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." "Indeed," Vara agreed, the translator rendering a note of what might have been humor in her voice. "But in this galaxy, one never knows when one might need a friend with claws." After Vara's departure, life at Auric Outpost gradually returned to its version of normal. New patients arrived. New medical challenges arose. New diplomatic crises threatened the station's neutrality. But something fundamental had shifted in the galactic order. The story of the predator, who whispered please, and the doctor who listened, spread throughout inhabited space, becoming legend in some quarters and cautionary tale in others. For Selene Maris, the experience had reinforced her core belief that life, in all its forms, was worth fighting for, even when that fight came at personal cost. And somewhere among the stars, an Exothar commander named Vara carried with her the knowledge that true strength lay not in refusing help, but in having the courage to accept it. In the vast darkness between worlds, their connection remained, predator and healer, bound not by obligation, but by the simple recognition of each other's humanity, in the deepest sense of that very human word. And in that connection lay the seeds of a transformation that would, in time, reshape the understanding of what it meant to be strong, to be honorable, to be alive in a universe of infinite possibility.